Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Techno Crime Fighters Forum, episode number 58. I'm Romola D, and I'm here today with Dr. Katherine Horton, particle physicist from CERN at Oxford, and Dr. Millicent Black from Tennessee. And we're here as usual to have a public conversation about things that are going on in our country and in the world. And we're here as human rights advocates to report that indeed anti-personnel electromagnetic technologies are being used on civilians all around the world, running under guise of surveillance, but engaging in massive abuse of human rights, human bodies, human brains. And so we're here to talk about all of that and explore these subjects. So let's get started this morning. Hi, everyone. Hi, Katherine. Hi, Millicent. I know that Millicent today has a great deal to share with us about how to collect medical evidence of these crimes against humanity and abuses to people in the population. And Katherine has some very interesting information to share with us about how universities and medical research institutions apparently are very involved in this kind of non-consensual human experimentation that's going on, in particular related to brain research. We are living in the decade or the millennium of the brain, and all of this is very much associated with brain research. So Katherine is going to share with us her investigations and her research into the subject. So I'm going to just kind of open the floor to both of them today. So this is their focus. So whichever one of you guys want to start. Did you want to start, Millicent, and just sort of open the floor a little bit?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I want to share with you today about some of the less expensive ways of gathering evidence that can be used in court, that can be substantiated by the medical profession. One of them being hair analysis. You can look it up online. Hair analysis have been admitted in court as evidence. And once you have a hair analysis, it tells things like the chemical toxicity in the body. It can tell about heavy metals that's in the body. The hair analysis I get even identifies harmful energies. And those harmful energies are things like microwave, gamma rays, X-rays. They actually do show up. It can also tell you a little bit more about your health condition. I get a hair analysis at a health food store that is ran by a pharmacist who is also a natural medicine doctor, and he uses Quest Laboratories. So they are a noted laboratory that whose accuracy will not be questioned. Once you get your hair analysis, you can not only use that as evidence of electromagnetic exposure, but you could also use some of the results to go to your medical doctor and ask for further testing that would prove what's been written in your report. Another thing you can have, and by the way, the hair analysis run usually $100 or less. I paid $100 for my first one and only $50 for those everyone thereafter. That pharmacist is in Florence, Alabama. He can do it by long distance, meaning that you could send your hair analysis to him. You would schedule an appointment for a consult. Once you have the results at the time of your appointment, he will go over that with you. He will send you the written report. And that's what's so good about certain testing that we can ask for. Make sure that you don't go to a practitioner that will not give you a written report. You need something in writing, and which he will do, and then he'll go over it with you and explain to you the ramifications of it. The other thing you can get is a thermography scan, in case you have not heard of what that is. A thermography scan is done by infrared energy, so you're not exposed to additional radiation or additional harmful energies. Melinda Kidder had begun to use a thermoscan with her body scan, in fact, and it kind of would validate the hot spots in the body, which sort of substantiate places where there are possibly unidentified objects, also called microchips. Excuse me. I've had 3 of those done. Thermal scans are very important for people who might have problems or questions concerning your breast health. because you aren't getting radiation to your breast. However, it can scan, look for hot spots, look for problem areas, vascular areas, and then recommend further medical follow-up. And the good thing about the thermal scan is the last two that I've had are read by doctors, medical doctors. So you see, that's medical evidence again. That medical doctor will identify areas in your body that could be of concern. If you suspect or have any validation that there's a chip in that area, then that's validation again. Um, the medical report will also make suggestions of specialists that you may want to follow up with to make sure that there are not some disease process starting. And once you've done that, again, you've got something in writing that you can take to your doctor and say, I need this test or that test based on this report. I was told that when you ask a medical doctor for further testing or for even a referral, that they're supposed to at least consider it and do it if possible. Thermal scans run under $400. So, and you can get either a full body scan, which is what I usually get, because I have chips all over. And even the bottom of my feet show the difference. A good thing about the thermal scans is they show areas where your circulation may not be good. And one of the things that's happening to us is that our nervous system is being highly, highly attacked. And I also already have severe nerve damage, not in my feet, but from below my knee to my ankle. That's also an area of high concentration of microchips in my body. So the thermal scans are extremely good for several different things, including the most important, and that is that you will get a medical doctor's report verifying areas of your body that they have concerns. And usually those are areas that there may be microchips and you may be being assaulted over and over. Those are the two most important areas, two most important tests that you could get that I do know are court admissible. There's also biofeedback scans like an ASARA scan. There's something called SCIO, SCIO. There's also something called QXCI, and they're all biofeedback scans where you are either hooked up to a computer or you can hold electrodes in your hand. It scans the entire body looking for areas of imbalance in frequencies on a cellular level. I get that. I've been getting the biofeedback scan since 2011. I get them every 2 to 3 months. And again, that biofeedback scan will identify areas of possible concern for you. It was mine, and again, I get a paper printout. Mine does indeed tell me where there are hormonal imbalances. It identifies harmful energies, that identifies chemicals that are being used on me, including pesticides. It has identified pesticides several times. It identifies drugs that have been infused into my body by frequencies like amphetamines and barbiturates. I never take them, but that scan will pick that up. It identifies heavy metals. Its accuracy is such that it has identified where I had a bad tooth in my mouth and a vertebrae out of place. That's the accuracy of the biofeedback scans. And they also run between $100 and $150. But these, with that scan, if it says that you've got an organ that's considerably, that shows up every time and you may want to get it checked out. For me, it was my thyroid. My thyroid is always out of balance. But I think that behind my thyroid, between my thyroid and my voice box is a chip. And that chip allows people to hear what I say. But that chip is also regularly being fired. And so I have a diseased thyroid as a result of all the toxins. One of the important things that I learned is that the thyroid collects its toxins from the body. And that's why it's usually one of the first organs in the body that begins to give you problems. But also the thyroid regulates so many hormones in the body. And one of the things that really help the perpetrators for us is that they can get our hormones off balance. I read an article many years ago that was called The Psychobiology of Criminology. And believe it or not, it went through all of the hormones and what the effect is when that hormone is out of balance. So they're coming at us from so many different areas, and we must know where they are coming at us at, and also be able to identify that these areas are off balance, that they're not functioning properly, and that it's a result of the assaults we're enduring. That means that they're trying to force us into behavior that would get us into trouble. Um, so I've told you about 3 different testing that can be done. All of them are very inexpensive when you consider paying $1,800 or $1,600 or over $1,000 for a written report, and that's the hair analysis. And you all can go online and look for a hair analysis practitioner in your area. Look for biofeedback. Look for an Asara or SKIO or QXCI practitioner in your area. When you call to find out how much they charge, be sure to ask them, do you give a paper report? Because you need a written report. And then I talked about the thermoscan, the thermography scans. They are very popular, believe it or not, because women who do not want to have the constant exposure of the mammogram to their breasts are going to the thermography scan first. And if it recognizes possible problem areas, then they may have other things. But these are 3 essentially medical tests that can be used. One, to request additional testing, and we can prove then, even by the test, because they usually do identify the chemical toxicity, the heavy metal toxicity, which can be and is usually metals and chemicals that you should have never had any exposure to begin with. So it's a cinch that is being sent to you by the electromagnetic frequencies, as well as the identification of any harmful energies that's coming at you. And I tell you, I've had all of them identified in paper writing. And I could actually go back, take all those tests, compare them, and tell you exactly when certain testing may have been being done on me based on the chemicals used, the heavy metals used, and the harmful energies that were being directed at me.
See, that's really impressive. I think I can also back you up certainly on the I think the hair analysis is a really good one, because we know for facts from all the witness reports and also from my own experience that they are trying to poison us. So they will break into homes regularly and they will try to put toxins into the food. For example, Ted Gunderson, the head of the Los Angeles FBI, was, according to the statement of his own doctor, poisoned with arsenic, but not suddenly, but over a period of time. And I think they're going to pull similar things. But arsenic poisoning, you can actually tell by hair analysis and other types of analysis, certainly also blood work. Now, in terms of blood work, I think there is an extensive list, and I think that would be another really valuable one. But I think there we need to still talk to a couple of people, because I think there is already things that that can show radiation damage to the body already in a blood test. But I think there we should make an actual precise list of what to look for. But also blood tests can show heavy metal poisoning as well. You know, and most of these, I'm not sure if in the US you can go and have a blood test privately, but in Europe you can, and it's really worth your time just doing that. For example, France has a lot of private labs that do that for you, and then if you just pick the lab spontaneously and randomly, the probability for sabotage is also lower. It also should be said that these tests should be redone several times, because if it's something really clear, you know, Intel will have an interest sabotaging clear-cut evidence. You know, so that if you have several tests and one of them shows up, then you know, the other one might have been sabotaged, or maybe it wasn't an uncertainty in the test and so on. So I would really recommend that. The other thing is, I can certainly back you up, Millicent, on the thermal imaging, because I have seen a report from one victim where you could not just see the chips, it was striking. So 4 chips were clearly visible, and on an area of the forehead where there's no hair, a circular round chip could be seen just by the heat it produced. So especially those people who are being tortured very hard with the chips, so that, for example, the chips on your head are being worked all the time, you have a lot of pain, and you feel that you have a lot of heat, that heat can be seen by a thermal image. So absolutely, definitely, that's a really good one. The one question I had is the biofeedback scans, are they admissible in court or not yet? Are they more for personal diagnosis?
They're more for personal diagnosis and for you to be able to take to your doctor and say, this is why I would like you to give me a test. You know, you can request then a test that is done in a laboratory or in a hospital radiology department that is court admissible. And you're right about the blood work. I had the best person to do that is a toxicologist. I had to be referred to a toxicologist by my medical doctor. Once that was done, then the toxicologist ordered the testing. It was extensive, really, really extensive, but it found things in my body that should not have been there, like silicone. I've never had anything in my body that I put there that has silicone, but chips are covered with silicone.
That's a really good one, actually. Yes, for people to look for, because doctors would not necessarily expect it, exactly because it shouldn't be in your body. Another thing to look for maybe is also titanium, because Melanie Richard's implant, throat implant, had massive amounts of titanium, entire titanium fibers. And it, I mean, depending on how the titanium is bound, it can also leak into the bloodstream. And I also remember that people found weird fibers, you know, in the blood as well. So especially if you're being infected with Morgellons or something like that, so synthetic biowarfare, you might also be able to see that. And I think, was it like dark field microscopy or whatever it's called, that where they managed to see that even better? I have to look it up. Somebody had some result like that.
I should also mention regarding fibers, actually, I interviewed Suzanne Marr and Tony Pantaloresco, and they have been reporting that these fibers are indeed part of these aerosols that, you know, people in America are being hit with, and all across Europe, literally all across the world. So yes, these fibers also are ending up in people's bodies, you know.
I've just sent a copy of a picture of my upper chest, the thermoscan. Catherine, are you able to pull it up a chance? Because it actually shows something in my upper right chest that looks like an anchor. And it was so obvious that the first time I had the scan, the doctor that was showing, you know, going over the results with me, she highlighted it in red, so that you can see it clearly does not belong there. And it could be something that could have been used or could be used at some point in the future to cause a hematoma. Has it shown up yet, Catherine?
So it's something like an actual, does it look like a foreign object of some kind?
Absolutely.
Hang on, I'm just bringing it up. I've just managed to download it. Just give me a second. I'm bringing it up now as we speak. Hang on. It's just disappeared off my screen. Yeah, here it is. Yes, okay, I've got it. I can share my screen.
Yeah, go for it.
Let me just and then Millicent can tell us which object it is. Hang on, it's this one. Okay, so can you guys see that?
Oh, wow. We need to kind of zoom in, maybe.
Yeah, let me zoom in. And okay, so this is now, first of all, Millicent, show me where I should focus. So this is a thermal image. Okay, so this is your throat, and this is your chest area. Okay, and then where's the anchor? Is it this red thing here, or is it that red thing? Sorry, can Millicent hear me?
I don't know if Millicent can hear you. Hey, Millicent, can you hear us? Something's frozen. You know what? Her video's frozen. I wonder if she's been bumped off. If she's lost audio.
Okay,
yeah.
So this is, I think, so she said that there's somewhere, it looks like almost like a hook. So this is a thermal image of her chest. I think this is her neck.
Yeah.
and then her arms. And I'm wondering if this is what she meant.
I know it does look like an interesting shape, doesn't it?
Yeah. But you can certainly see patterns where, you know, it's different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, she has to point out which bit she
Yeah,
actually.
I guess we have to wait for. I think she may be trying to come back in.
Yeah, I can see that she's been bumped off. Okay, so it's usually when people get bumped off, it means that the the evidence is, you know, right above the target.
Yes.
Okay, so let me use the time. I mentioned the thermal imaging, the blood testing. Oh yes, also there's Millicent.
Mm-hmm.
He literally turned off the tablet. Literally turned it off.
Yeah, I thought you might do something like that. Let
Interesting,
me
huh?
share
Very
my
interesting.
screen again, because I
But
think
did you get the
yes, here. This is it. So
right
I've got.
there? See that big anchor up in my chest?
Do you mean this red bit there?
Yeah. Yes.
This thing right here,
That's right there.
and this one as well.
No, just the one in the upper. Yeah, just that one.
That one, yeah. You can definitely see this and then that, yeah. Yeah.
It does look like a very distinct anchor shape, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It does.
And also, you know, here, what's really important with the thermal images is that you see, you show the calibration. So this is just a screenshot, so this is fine, right, for showing it. But for
Right.
cool, you can have these thermal images, and usually on the right-hand side or left-hand side, there's a scale explaining what the yellow, the blue, and so on means. So yellow clearly means it's warmer, and so on. One of the things that I noticed is that depending on the sensitivity of this device, you have to be very careful. If, for example, there's a beam of light from a lamp or from the sun shining on you, then that might show up. But the way around that is that most thermal images take a normal image and then a thermal image, both at the same time, so that you can then see on the normal image that this, for example, this area isn't being, you know, highlighted by a sunlight, you know, or something like that.
Right. In fact, you have to have a 15-minute cooling down period in an extremely cold room so that you don't show up any unnatural hotspots, and the curtains are indeed drawn. So it's a very dimly lit room with that shows, you know, that, and you're just standing in front of an infrared camera.
Excellent. I think this is a really good idea. I'm so glad you brought it up, because I'm not allowed to show, for legal reasons, I'm not allowed to show the image of the victim. But on that image, I can tell you that 4 chips could be seen clearly on the head, under the hair. And this victim was being tortured extremely brutally. And you could definitely see that these chips were being worked overtime because they were generating heat. And I suspect, so on the skull, it's even easier because you have the actual bone and then the chips are on top. So you have a very thin layer where the chips can be. And this is, if they're generating any heat, you can actually see that through the skin on the head. But that's a very good image, a very good diagnostic. Oh yes, the other thing before I forget, the other thing I wanted to add to this in terms of medical testing, that was a real eye-opener for me personally and produced some great evidence, that is going to an expert dermatologist, so a skin doctor, ideally somebody who's specializing in facial cosmetic surgery, and then ask him specifically to look for laser surgery scars, and ask specifically for laser surgery scars because they are very fine. And this is why doctors who are doing cosmetic surgery in the face will know about it, because they're using it themselves. So if you get, I don't know what, a facelift or whatever, you know, these will be very fine, fine surgical scars. But when they're implanting chips, they seem to be using laser scalpels. And then the scars can be mistaken to be a normal skin fold by a normal doctor, but in actual fact, these people will know about it. And when I went, I have now 2 dermatologist certificates. They have each found half a dozen of laser surgery scars, and not both the same ones. So it also takes a lot of time. So if you already can guide the eye of the dermatologist and you say, oh, can you please have a look at my neck? A neck is a really typical one. Even below the hairline, that's standard for these chips. But any such place, then it's much easier to find them because your body area is huge, and the dermatologists have very limited time. So, it's easier to, if you guide them, and don't be surprised if you have to go to several of them to actually find all of your chips, because it takes a long time.
And I should remind anyone who's viewing this and perhaps for the first time and is unfamiliar with the notion of covert implantation that indeed many thousands of people around this country, the USA, and in every country in Europe, people are coming forward to report that they have been apparently non-consensually covertly implanted, and they are finding evidence of these chips through various other means as well, including RFID detection, etc. So this notion of people reporting chips, finding chips, we're talking about microchips, we're talking about MEMS, micro electromechanical devices, biomems, very tiny, tiny little devices that are slipped subdermally under the skin. We're talking about neurostimulators, again, very tiny devices that are literally stuck in people's heads. Remember, we're living in the decade of the brain. We're living in the decade of both public domain brain research and covert ops brain research by the dark agencies, places like DARPA, places like the DIA, the CIA, NSA, etc., who will never confess to doing this research, but from the words of whistleblowers, are indeed engaged in doing this kind of research. So when we talk about microchips, these are not delusions, these are not fantasies, this is not fiction writing. This is actual fact in 2018. People are reporting chips, people are finding chips. There have been court cases with people discovering chips in their bodies and actually suing medical facilities for having installed them. David Larson sued the CIA for installing even more chips in his body than he had originally agreed to, because he actually engaged in some consensual research, and then he was later used for non-consensual research by the CIA. So his case is actually pretty famous. And there are many other, very famous and notorious cases. So I do want to sort of bring everybody to, to the page of reality here. This is 21st century reality. And the chips today are very, very small. There are things like electronic tattoos now. There are things like inks, which are actually engaging in RFID establishment. They're actually radio frequency transmitting devices. And one of the ways in which people have been detecting chips in their bodies is because these chips are actually transmitting certain specific radio frequencies, all of which have an FCC registration equivalent, and some apparently which don't. So that's another story. But most of them are indeed registered with the FCC. And that's sort of a means to figure out where the chip is coming from, which company it's associated with, who manufactured that chip, and which university is using those frequencies in their research. And maybe this is a good segue to what Katherine had intended to talk about. Tell us a little bit about these universities that are actually engaging in brain research.
Oh, absolutely. Actually, yes. And as I'm gearing up to this, I just would like to share my screen and point people, for those people who are newcomers, I would like to point you to Techno Crime Fighters Forum episode 26 that was broadcast in September 2017, where at minute 20-46, you can see me hold up a massive implant that was operated out of Melanie Richard's throat. Sorry, I just get feedback. And this particular implant was 3.5 centimeters times 1.5 times 1.5 centimeters. Okay, massive. And this is an implant that I myself took to a Swiss lab. And I had it analyzed at the Paul Scherrer Institute in Switzerland. And this is a microscope image of the implant that you can see up here. And you can see these white fibers. And as it turns out, the white fibers that you can see all throughout the implant are actually titanium fibers. And the red that you can see, it's also explained in the Techno Crime Fighters Forum, is an X-ray spectroscopy image. An X-ray fluorescence image, I should call it. It's exactly the same thing. And at a minute 41:50 seconds, you can see a huge titanium spike in the X-ray fluorescence spectrum that I took with the research at the Palshera Institute. And this proves that this implant is 100% synthetic, because this white stuff here, you can see the little red circle, that's the X-ray beam. This white thing is actually titanium. It has a huge titanium content. So that's one thing I would like to point you to. So this is already documented analysis. And as I said, this is a scientific analysis I conducted myself with the researchers at the Palshera Institute. And then I also would like to point you to the Alex Russo interview where he's talking about the goal of the New World Order is to RFID chip everybody. So this is not new, and this is this entire New World Order is exactly what we're talking about, albeit, we call it differently. I call it the organized crime cartel and their plan, but it's exactly the same thing.
That's Aaron Russo, I think.
Catherine. Oh, Aaron Russo, sorry, right. Yes. The actual
He's not the only one. I just posted on my new page, which I have up on my website. I invite everyone to check it out. Affidavits, letters of validation and support, and legislation efforts attesting to electromagnetic weapon use and non-consensual human experimentation on my website. I posted a Representative Jim Guess letter that Millicent actually supplied me a long time ago. And what he's talking about is VeriChip, the company that produced VeriChip. And various research institutions using VeriChip had indeed been non-consensually implanting people with VeriChips as tracking devices. We're also talking about agencies. We're talking about the intelligence agencies, and I think we are talking about the CIA in particular. So they've been implanting people with these tracking devices for ages, and Representative Jim Guest was making an appeal to the rest of Congress to say, we need to start listening to the reports of victims, and we need to stop companies and agencies doing this kind of tracking, because all of this is being done non-consensually. And along the same lines, I also post, or I'm not too sure if I posted, yes, I did post under legislative efforts, legislation efforts. If you look under there, the very first link over there is Senator John Glenn's report to Congress during, I think, the 105th Congress about the Human Research Subject Protections Act. I think it was Bill 193, which ultimately was not passed. Surprise, surprise, right? They never want to pass things like this, which give protections to civilians and citizens. He was pleading in front of Congress for the necessity, the absolute necessity to establish legislation to protect Americans, to protect all citizens from non-consensual research, to demand informed consent in every case. And he made a real case over there. He spoke extensively. And he said, actually, that he himself, as an astronaut, because Senator John Glenn was once an astronaut. So as an astronaut, he did commit himself to doing some research. And he allowed his body to be used for research. However, he said that was consensual research. And there is a huge difference between consenting to medical research and then being used and exploited and abused and persecuted as a subject without one's own volition, consent, or awareness or consciousness, you see? So non-consensual research without informed consent is horrific. It's frightful. It's not something that should exist in any civilized society. And he made some very impassioned remarks about that. So that also can be found, on that page. So I recommend that everybody check that out and, in fact, print out Senator John Glenn's remarks and use them because they're so valuable today.
I think this is absolutely on the money. Oh, by the way, I think Millicent forgot to switch off her microphone. So I'm just until she's back, I wanted to point people to one more whistleblower report, which is, you're absolutely right, it's Aaron Russo. And I should say that I'm pointing these things out. So this, the evidence provided here And also, yes, it's Aaron Russo, not Alex. So Aaron Russo, you can download these videos and they are court evidence. These are testimonies that you can quote in court. And the other one that you can certainly quote in court is the interview by Stephen Greer of William Pavlik here. So that's a almost 2-hour interview where this eyewitness who's helped to develop RFID chips even specifies that it is Siemens. Siemens got hold of the patent and or was trying to buy up or get body chips produced in the billions as quickly as possible. Okay, and he identifies Siemens as having a covert attempt or a covert program to produce these chips, and they were specifically, for human beings. And these chips originally were thought to be used for things like racehorses, because racehorses also can be cloned, can be stolen, and so on and so on. And also from this is now my personal testimony of having spoken to a European microwave weapons expert who also did work for the government and is a recognized court expert. He told me personally and other witnesses, including Melanie Richan, that agents have been implanted with chips since the 1960s. So 1960s people, not even 70s. So we're going back to the 1960s at least. And this was normal. And he also confirmed that most agents would be implanted on the back of the head or in the neck above the hairline. So that's also something that is standard. This is not surprising. This is ancient technology. It's over 40 years old.
And in fact, Barry Trower has also said that openly in video conversations that people have been, it was common knowledge, he says, that right up till the 1970s, that in intelligence agencies to speak openly and casually about microchips. But it's not until the mid-70s when they came up with things like the Official Secrets Act and whatever, Protection of Secrecy Acts, that they came up with both in the UK and in the US, that the open conversation about microchips was kind of tabled. So they stopped speaking openly about it, but obviously they kept doing it because, we have people today reporting it and finding these chips in their bodies. So very interesting. And William Pavlik, by the way, that Siemens, actually, apparently, a subsidiary of Siemens ran a gig for a little while, manufacturing billions and billions of chips, he says. And then they kind of closed up shop and disappeared off the map. But they'd actually put these chips out into the world, and these were chips that are trackable from space.
Wow.
From, I forget how many miles now. I have to look up my article because I did post on this. I did investigate this at a certain point in time, and it's on my website. So it's like 400 miles away from space or something like that.
I remember that in the interview, the bit that I remember is that he said that the very first chips that they developed, they just as a laugh were seeing how how far they could pick them up. And it was something like 30 feet, but they used literally just a grill as a basic antenna system, and that worked already with the most basic thing. And they were amazed that they could still pick up the signal, so the most rudimentary antenna system. The one thing I wanted to say is talking about chips, and this is really extremely important for court cases and evidence. I would like everybody, I would like to advise you, if you feel that you've been implanted for court use, get hold of a copy of the Global Brain Chip and Messages, written by the expert Dr. Hildegard Staninger down here. And the reason why I really recommend that you get hold of a copy is because as soon as you do, you can take you can open the book, and inside the book, she actually shows you what a brain chip looks like. This is a brain chip, people, that was taken out of a patient in 2011. And this is a nasal chip, And you can see antenna system, still antennas sticking out. So, because it's a book, I can't just scan it and publish it for all of you guys, but there's measurements here. So inside the book, she's showing scientific measurements that you can quote. And she's also showing different implants, actual, microscopy images of the implants. And she does exactly the same type of spectroscopy that I did at the lab in Switzerland. So you can quote all of these things. And most astoundingly, and this is when I got the book and I had to flee my flat, because I was machine gunned. So I took the book somewhere into the middle of the countryside and I sat down and I had a coffee and I thought, okay, here I can read this book in peace. And I opened it on the first page, the introduction. And in the second paragraph is the following line that suddenly made suddenly my entire life and all the targeting made sense, because she says, currently, we have now the interface of artificially intelligent medical devices that will treat cancer and critical care patients remotely. And by the way, you have to know that the entire medical industry is totally filled with cartel people. The organized crime cartel thrives and makes money off this. What this means is that cartel signaling and the gangster talk, the code words, will also appear in scientific language. This is something that I had to use. So when they're talking about critical care patients, they actually mean you targeted people, because they really couldn't give a rat's about the people who need critical care because they're running a genocide anyway. But they really want to put you into critical care, because if you keep talking against the New World Order, that's going to be trouble for them. So you are a critical care patient in their world, okay? I'm not implying that Stanninger means this here, but certainly the cartel, when you read critical care, keep in mind that it might mean something else. So, okay, so this is the opening, right? We now have, and imagine what this means. Dr. Stanninger says we have now the interface of artificially intelligent medical devices that will treat cancer and critical care patients remotely. In other words, this sentence already says we're going to be hooked up to an AI that will take care of us and will basically do warfare on us remotely, right, by having things implanted in us. And each one of us will have their personal battle against an uber powerful AI. And if we don't know we have these implants in ourselves, we can be crippled by something that can think at the speed of light. Okay, and has the power of several supercomputers if necessary. Okay, so this is one thing, you already start swallowing. But then the next sentence is the universities of Nottingham, Oxford, and Warwick are the leading blue sky, are the leading blue sky research into artificially intelligent medical devices that will improve the treatment for cancer and intensive care patients. Wound care, and even paralyzed people, is aimed to provide more personalized, accurate, and timely care, and ultimately save lives in the world of precision medicine. Sounds wonderful. About a couple of years ago, reading that, I would have thought, oh, I'm so proud to having been at Oxford. And now when I read that, I suddenly thought, oh, that's why I'm in this program. I'm a foreigner. They are doing blue sky brain research. And it's widely known, it's in print, and hey, I've got a bunch of head chips and most likely also brain chips. So that makes a lot of sense. In other words, I've got it in black and white that Oxford is doing this research, and therefore suddenly my job of finding out who is doing these Nazi experiments on me has become very easy indeed, because I was at Oxford for 12 years, and that's when the entire problem started. So, but I'm saying the same will hold for people at Warwick, or people at Nottingham University, or at people who had something to do with Oxford and might have ended up being research subjects. For all those people who were not connected to these universities, you can still use this book, because it's absolutely, I can just flick through it and it's just image after image after image that you can scan and put straight into your court bundle as evidence, as scientific evidence.
Katherine, I have a couple questions about that book. I don't know if you've had a chance to read the whole of it. Does it talk about nanotechnology at all?
I think, well, she talks about mesogens, which I still have to wrap my head around what exactly they are. But yes, she does talk about it, and she talks about nano hooks and nano claws and synthetic materials growing in these little, here, for example, nanotubes and nanofibers.
Oh wow.
With images and so on, and silicon and an actual little arrays, probably self-assembling,
Because
things.
if you look into the whole field of nanotechnology, it's highly advanced right now, and it is indeed doing precisely this kind of thing. It's working with precision medicine initiatives, and it's creating tiny little bots and self-assembling thingies and devices that are able to enter the human body, traverse the veins, the arteries, coagulate, self-assemble, replicate, as you indeed found out with your analysis of Melanie's throat implant, right? Because that presumably is something that's self-assembled in her throat. It wasn't implanted wholesale. It was self-assembled from tiny little nanotech, right?
I think in the case of Melanie, what happened is that she actually woke up with a huge surgical scar in the morning in her private.
She did have a surgical scar. Okay.
She did have a huge surgical scar, and it was actually a huge lump. But as she went to work, because she couldn't do anything, she had to go to work, and she didn't know what the hell it was. She said that this thing started, but really macroscopically started moving itself into position by itself as she was at work, and she felt this thing move. Now, she says that it was even moving at rest. And when I had to figure out how that could be done, I mean, of course, you can have remote controlled little micromotors, but also a very easy way to do that is to use memory alloys and just heat them with microwave radiation.
Oh, but there's also, if you go right now, I can, post the links when I eventually find them, because I did a bit of research on nanotech out there. They do have self-assembling nanotech, and there are videos now on YouTube which will show you how these tiny little thingies get together and start forming chains, and then they get progressively larger, and then they do precisely what you are talking about. They kind of self-assemble into some kind of shape.
Yeah, exactly. I think what I have seen is certainly fibers growing. And that happens a lot. And actually talking about diagnostics that people can do, I have seen, scans of people where they use ultraviolet light, known as black light, and you can see the fiber network under the skin. Wow. And this fiber network should not be, naturally, your body should not be reflecting this sort of light, or should not be showing up under ultraviolet or under black light, but it does. And you can get black light torches, off Amazon, off the internet. The other thing is also in terms of diagnostics, something to do is if you feel that you have eye implants, you might not actually feel the object, but you have the feeling that your stalkers can look through your eyes. What you could have on your lens is thin film technology, completely transparent, completely, you wouldn't feel it. You wouldn't even feel the readout, which also sits on the white bit of your lens. But apparently these things do show up again under ultraviolet light, known as black light, and the way they reflect is different from your natural lens and the iris. They will reflect, I'm just in the meantime looking for an image of this, which I've seen in this book. They will reflect turquoise or purple, I think. And then here in this book, which you can also use for court, there's an image of people exactly with this setup. So this is the Eye of Horus effect, okay?
This is what Millicent reports as well. I reported on that in her article because she has information from medical doctors who actually examined her eyes and found something like a turquoise ring, I think.
Exactly. And here you can actually see what it looks like. And the idea is you can take the, this is why I should invest in this book, because you can scan this and put it straight into your quote bundle and then quote the book. But also you can do this diagnostic yourself. And once you know what it looks like, you can buy, a torch. Don't shine it straight into your eye, but you can reflect off it. And what this means is if you get this odd effect and compare it to people who are not targeted, what this means is you just have a very thin crystal layer on your lens. It's like thin film technology. It's transparent crystals, but they can be used as a readout. So it's almost like having a little, LCD camera lens, in your eye. And then, of course, they can see exactly what you can see as well,
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so important to sort of just speak openly about all of these things that people are reporting and people are finding, and for which we do indeed find evidence and correlation, in books like this, which are actually speaking openly about the technology that's out there. And because what we are actually reporting is, harmful, pernicious, non-consensual implantation of all of these medical devices and nanotech. So.
I think you might have to unmute, Millicent.
Oh, Okay.
Sorry, that's when she was gone.
Did that do it? Not yet? Oh my goodness. So they're not letting me unmute Millicent.
I can still see the mute symbol.
Oh boy. I'm trying to unmute over here.
Oh, this is just a joke. I mean, really, the hacking is getting
Yeah,
to
this
us.
is hacking. It's definitely hacking because I'm not muting her here. Catherine, can you try from your end? Because I think you may have done it from your end where you muted her.
Unfortunately, I'm not a moderator in this video
okay
call,
now?
so I don't have controls. Yeah. No, now the symbol is gone. Now we should be able to hear her. Say
I'm
something,
gonna just have
Millicent.
to hold it here. I was
I
trying
can't
to
hear you,
reposition it.
Millicent.
You can't?
Oh no. Well, the symbol is gone,
Is that better?
but I still can't hear her. No, I can't hear you.
Oh my
How
goodness.
about now? No.
Can you see me?
No, I still can't.
Oh.
Oh no, not again.
Can I hear you? Oh,
Yeah, now I can hear you. Now I can hear you.
you know what? I just realized something. They've moved the volume down. I did not do this myself. Can you hear me? I've just moved the volume up for all of us. Someone had moved it down. This is so bizarre. This is our control room, supposedly, on my desktop, and it's been moved down. So I moved it back up. Yeah.
Wow.
So, Millicent, we were just talking about all of those different kinds of, implanted devices that you certainly have reported and you've found medical evidence for, right?
Right. And Melinda Kidder did it with the black light.
Yeah. Sorry, just
That's
before
how
before you start, can you turn the screen down? Because bit further. Okay, now I can see you. Thank you. Sorry, that's perfect.
That's bizarre. It's bizarre. I could not get my tablet repositioned so that it would show me. But Melinda Kidder used the black light to identify that purple ring around my iris. But when I'm wearing contact lenses, and contact lenses are as clear as plastic, as saran wrap, you can see the purple ring.
Wow. You mean somebody without any kind of,
Right.
zooming in device, like what do they call magnifying lens, can see it?
With the naked eye, right. You
With the
can see that
naked
purple hue
Wow.
around my iris.
So
Wow.
it must be something, because if you put the contact lens on, then that already has a different refractive index, and sometimes it shifts the colors. So you get basically a frequency shift sometimes in the material, just separates out the colors. So then if it makes it visible, it means that they double the refractive index of the implant plus the contact lens amplifies the effect of the thin film technology that's on your lens. But it's really good to know for people. So, maybe buy some in Europe. You have these disposable contact lenses, with no strength or barely any strength. You can buy it for a few euros, and just put it in and see if you can actually tell a difference.
That's an idea, because that's exactly what I do when I'm wearing the contact lens. You can clearly see it.
And is it
something that
a hard lens that you're wearing?
No, I'm wearing soft lens.
Yeah. See, that's perfect, because here certainly you can buy it in in like a shop where you can buy shampoo and stuff like that. You can buy contact lenses these days for barely
Really?
like a few dollars, equivalent.
Wow.
Yeah.
You have to pay hundreds of dollars over here to get
Really?
contact
Oh
lenses.
my goodness.
Yeah.
No,
You have to get a prescription and all that. You can't just buy them off the shelf, I don't think.
Yeah.
Right.
No, you can these days. And it's just a piece of, transparent plastic. So there's no reason why it should be so expensive,
Oh, are you talking about decorative lenses or something that are not
I'm talking about ones with refractive index. So you can just choose, is it like 1.75 dioptries or minus 1.75 and so on, 1.5.
That's really interesting. For a long time, I used to wait till I went home to India every summer, and then I would renew my contact lenses over there. And then I discovered, well, the price over there has shifted up, and it's exactly the same as the American prices now. So it's pointless. Might as well get them here, But it's still about $500.
That's insane, because to manufacture, transparent bits of plastic, of this size. I mean, you could just manufacture, you know, like a ton for what, you know, $5 in some Chinese, you know, plant. It's incredible.
See, that's very interesting because, you know, in a sense, contact lenses are something that are sort of socially acceptable, right? Over time, culturally acceptable. Implants, the temporary implants, we stick them in our eyes, we don't think twice about them. But these other implants that we're talking about, they're invasive. And when they're non-consensual, they're most definitely not culturally or socially acceptable. And so we have some real criminals running about in the medical industry, in the pharmaceutical industry, and in the defense and intelligence industry, and security and surveillance, who are actually engaging in non-consensual covert implantation, you know, via the national clandestine services and so on and so forth. And, you know, at one point I remember trying to do a whole, trying to get an understanding of what clandestine really meant for these agencies. And I think what I discovered was that when something is clandestine, or when something comes under the clandestine label, it's even worse than above top secret or whatever. You know, it means that even any awareness of it is not to be spoken about by anybody. So it's so thoroughly buried, you know. So that's part, I think, of the kind of mystique that we are dealing with here with non-consensual implants and covert implantation, and the activities, the criminal activities of these dark agencies that are engaging in these dark ops, you know, all over the place. So, but in any case, sorry, Katherine, your mic is turned off.
Ramona, move your screen. You are showing only part of your body.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Can you see my face?
I can see your face, but the part of the left side is cut off. Push it over to your left some. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Okay, I'm wondering if, you know, the kind of the video that's showing on each of our desktops is accurate or not. I guess we'll find out when we look at what's shown up on the screen finally for everybody else. But because each one of us,
I couldn't find the image earlier, so when I was talking, I couldn't actually unmute myself. But one of the things I wanted to throw in, and I know, you know, for people who haven't been following this crime cartel for a very long time, it's always a bit, you know, out there when I mention it. But you have to take into account what cartel signaling, so what the cartel itself puts out as advertising. And one of the things that I've shown before, but I will just remind people so that they have a mental image of what we're talking about. Cartel signaling, you know, occurs in music videos. And if you look at the Taylor Swift video called "Ready for It," they actually show you these eye implants. Okay, so here it is. It's kind of like stylized, but that's exactly what we're talking about. And the person who has an eye implant on their lens they can be, if they don't know they have this eye implant, they can be shown all sorts of stuff. So here it kind of implies that, you know, the person sees some sort of diagnostic, almost robotic sort of information. But the reason why I make such a big thing out of that is, first of all, the cartel has been advertising this for a very long time, quite blatantly, quite out there. Also, they're advertising it as something cool to have. Okay, so it's quite normal. I think a lot of the cartel members already have these eye implants. But if you do not know you have them, one of the things that they can play with you is that using artificial intelligence and fast algorithms, they can overlay images on the images that you see. So stuff that I've heard from victims is that suddenly you like look into the middle of your room and you see a crawling snake in the middle of your room. Now it's not there, it's just a projection onto this lens, okay? It's just a little movie that appears and has been, you know, broadcast in. But unless you know that it's just projected onto your lens, you will think, oh my God, there's a snake. Or you will think they make stuff appear into the room like a hologram, but it's actually just on your lens. And this is why you can see it. It's real in the sense that you have been shown it, as much as you seeing a movie is real, but it's not actually an object in the room. So this is things appearing in the room, could be something on your eye. Certainly, you know, what's typical for the CIA and all intel agencies is anything that's threatening or to do with death and injury. So if you suddenly see dead people in your flat, lying around and then disappearing, it's an eye, most likely an eye implant. But also the other thing is that they will try to give you the impression you've gone mad by, for example, overlaying devil's heads on people who you are talking to. So you are speaking to somebody and suddenly you're speaking to the devil or some really grisly face that has been overlaid. Now that is just CGI. It's computer generated, graphics and stuff like that. And that is just the kind of game they play with these stupid little implants. So,
and they can also do CGI, can't they, through the BCI CBI interfaces, the brain computer interface.
Yeah.
Right? So they are pumping in synthetic images through the brain computer interface. And again, that's the story of a brain chip. There's a neurochip involved, so there's an actual physical device. There you go. So this is something, this may sound like very esoteric information to some people, but this is modern science. This is current day science. And it's also, it's both from the public domain and it's from the dark ops at this point in time, because there's a lot of disclosure in the public domain currently about brain research and about brain interface research, brain computer interface research, about artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, filling the head with nanotech and connecting brains to the internet. If you recall, just this last week, in fact, Sherry sent us around that video, right, from MIT Media Labs, of that guy with a little bit of a little device stuck over his left ear or something and connected to his brain, whereby he was able to think a thought, project it onto the computer screen, and then make things happen. So he was showing synthetic telepathy, but through this brain device. He was able to order the 60 Minutes producer, the young producer, pizza based on his instructions to the computer and through the internet. And they did eventually get pizza at the end of that show.
Exactly. And I just would like to flash up sorry, Millicent, you can talk. In the meantime, I'll just flash up the actual video that we're talking about. It's a 60-minute interview with this young man here. And he's got this little device that actually reads his brain. And by the way, open brackets, this is something that I wanted to tweet out, but didn't in the end. If you look at the age of this young man, I think he was born after the start of the 1980s. Maybe in India, but maybe in the US, judging by his accent. And this would mean that he's most likely brain chipped, according to the research of Millicent. Because of Ronald Reagan's Immigration Control Act that allowed all Americans to be chipped at birth, open brackets, brain chipped too, if they were born after 86 or 87, I think, So heck knows what this little device is reading out inside his brain or in his throat and so on and so on, So don't just think that it will just work just if you put this plastic thing around your ear. There might be a lot more covert tech in all of us that makes this stuff work.
And I guess that was his right here as well. And, there's a very important point to be made about that young man, actually. So he's an MIT student, young Indian guy, as you said. I couldn't tell either whether he's from India or from America, Indian American or Indian or whatever. In any case, young guy, MIT student, high tech, right? MIT with its vision of high tech. MIT has very close connections to DARPA, everybody should know, and gets massive funding from DARPA. I think DARPA, in fact, has a big office at MIT because I've been down there and think I've seen it. So, so when you think MIT, think DARPA, think the Pentagon, think the Department of Defense. They're very closely tied, all right? So here you have this young so-called genius whiz working on this brain-computer interface, et cetera, But the way in which it's being presented to all of us in America and to the world via 60 Minutes, this little cozy little conversation, all, laughs and smiles and ha, ha, ha. And, the young producer saying, oh, I'd love to have some pizza. And can you order me pizza? And let's see if we can order pizza. And then they order pizza. And it's like, oh, it's all about pizza. Well, actually, this brings up Pizzagate. But apart from that, this is a way of gaining consent from the American populace. This is a way of packaging this with a bright red bow and saying to America, look, this is wonderful. Connecting our brains to the internet is simply fabulous. We just have to look at the screens and, we just can order pizza anytime we want or get Chinese takeout or whatever. We don't even have to speak anymore. This is about manufacturing consent, and I'm especially peeved about this. I wrote a long article about consent of the governed versus exemptions to informed consent, which are written into the common rule, which is America's version of the Nuremberg Code over here, which is supposed to prevent medical institutions from implanting people non-consensually, okay? But we've got exemptions to informed consent handed on a platter to the intelligence agencies, to criminal justice, to the DOD, to the DOJ, etc. Massive numbers of institutions and agencies, okay? Exemptions to informed consent. But if you really examine that and ask yourself the very simple question, how does it sit with every American to be told that it's okay if randomly and covertly Americans are picked out of the populace and non-consensually implanted, sharp shot, whacked with nanotech or with biomems when they go to a swim meet or go to the library with their daughter for their daughter's Latin class? How does it sit with every American to understand that this could happen to you, your daughter, your granddaughter? These are the kinds of questions that Senator John Glenn raised, in 1997 that have still not been fully addressed by the human rights world over here, nor by the human research protection industry in this country, or the world. So that's what I was asking in that article. How does it sit with people to know that these exemptions exist, that any one of you could be attacked in this way? Do we have consent of the governed in this regard? And my answer to that is, no, actually we don't. Most Americans would say, no, I don't think that's cool, right? It's not cool for there to be information or legislation to this effect, stating that there are exemptions and agencies can implant any one of us. So you see, there's a big difference. Consent is a big, big deal. We don't have consent of the governed. And when we have things like this from the MIT Media Lab on 60 Minutes, the attempt over there is to manufacture consent or presume consent, So that's
Romola, reality is that the technology is still 30 years beyond what they are showing on that television screen.
Very good point.
And you and I would have the capacity right now to order pizza from our minds and not have a device stuck to our heads. And that's what's
because many people who have come forward today are indeed reporting non-consensually implanted brain chips, which are being read and which are being, downloaded too from elsewhere, and else how, from these research institutions and agencies, etc. So I hope we've established a case at this point in time for the absolute factuality and actuality of these implants. And to tell people that these implants actually constitute medical evidence. And there are ways in which one can get that medical evidence. I mean, I think there's much, much more to be said on the subject, right? We haven't touched on MRIs or X-rays or how exactly one goes about getting those in this situation that we have currently, So most people should also know, if people don't, if there are journalists listening to this, people should also know that when people go to hospitals and say they suspect microchips or they suspect implants and they'd like scans, do you know what happens to people? They get carted off to the psych ward. They get carted off to psychiatry, which is an absolute travesty and an absolute joke, because we are living in a day and time when non-consensual covert implantation is most definitely taking place. And the medical industry, the entire bunch of doctors out there on the planet need to wake up and understand that when people are coming forward, reporting non-consensual covert implantation, what they're actually reporting is a crime against humanity. They are being victimized and abused, and doctors, who should be working as human rights advocates for all of humanity, should be stepping forward, should be listening, and should be taking them to a radiologist and taking them to, to the scanning part of the world, which I guess is radiology, right? Take them to radiology. Right. Don't take them to psychiatry, please.
Well, I am glad to report that as of, I think, October 2016, a woman reported to an emergency room in the East that she had been implanted and that she was being used in human trafficking, in human sex trafficking. The ER doctor believed her, took her to radiology. They found the implant and he removed it. So it's no longer a matter of delusion. It actually is a matter of reality. I did my doctoral dissertation on educating the church to empower women who suffer in silence from domestic abuse. And my introduction, in the introduction, I identified the reality of illegal implantation and consensual implantation, not from a medical standpoint. Families in Florida were implanting each other. Boyfriends and girlfriends are implanting each other. The president of Mexico City had himself implanted. So it's not a delusion. It's in the news. And it's in the news as a normal daily activity anymore. So
Absolutely.
that's something that I wanted to get added to this podcast for future reference.
Thank you, Millicent. That was actually brilliant. That's a brilliant reminder. Yes, I do recall that story where this young woman, and I think it was an undisclosed hospital in the United States, who actually went to the ER emergency room, and showed the laceration on her body and mentioned that she was being sex trafficked. And then they opened it up and they found, well, I guess they x-rayed her first and then they found the implant. It was a tracking chip of probably a very chip, possibly
Exactly.
a very chip, I should say.
I remember seeing that article, and the one comment I would like to say about that article is that it actually is very beneficial. So you can search it and you can find it, and you should convert it to PDF. So print to PDF and include it in your court case as a precedent, a documented precedent. But I also remember distinctly that at least the articles I've seen on this case showed the old style tracking chip where you can literally see the coil by eye. It looks like the size of a grain of rice, and
that's the very chip. That's the big fat rice grain very chip. You're right. It's the big one. Nowadays they have them much smaller. You're right.
Exactly. And that was, I thought it was good, but at the same time, it reaffirmed this image that this is what these chips look like. Oh, no. Those are what the chips looked like 40 years ago. We're way beyond that. So keep that in mind. And the reason why that's important is that if you print off this article and you maybe prime yourself, or you prime your still magically unknowing doctors to thinking this is what they should look for, when you do a scan like an MRI or an X-ray, and these guys are looking for a big block of metal, they are not going to find it. The chips are much smaller than that. And if the metal object is smaller than the resolution of the MRI, then the resolution, this is just how physics works, the resolution will smear it out and it will look like a shadow. So your doctors will rightfully, within their limited knowledge, claim it's a lipoma or it's a calcification, because they will not know that actually there's a hard bit of metal that is, giving a very strong signal on the MRI, but it's being blurred out by the resolution of the MRI. So you either need to get a specialist machine with super high resolution to get around that problem, or you need to tell your doctors that you're specifically looking for odd shadows, lipomas and calcifications in odd places specifically, and that they could also be chips. Okay, so just because it looks like a calcification and not like a big whacking piece of metal on the MRI does not mean it's not a chip. Okay, it could still be a chip. This is one
Katherine, that's really good information to add. My medical doctor told me that. I have been working with an extremely cooperative medical doctor who said to me, it's been, I guess, 6 years now ago, that she wanted to help me prove that what's happening to me is not just normal medical decline in my health. And she ordered some tests, and one of them came back with several both calcified and non-calcified nodules in specific areas of my body. And she explained to me, she says, now, when your body first identifies an unidentified object, it collects tissue around it. She said, that's your non-calcified nodule. She says, but the longer it stays there, the tissue hardens around it, and that makes it a calcified nodule. But she did indeed emphasize that it's an unidentified object in the center of it, just as you have described. And I'm telling you, the areas that CT scan found these objects in my body is quite upsetting.
Yeah, And you know what? This is another thing that we should mention now that we're talking about medical tests, is that you also do not think that you will just have one chip. In my experience, you will have at least 24. Okay, so don't freak out about it. You know, let not the thought of it freak you out, because hey, I have at least 24 chips, probably more. You know, Millicent, I think, has 53. Is that right? 51 or 53?
Well, there were 53 that Melinda Cuter found.
Yeah.
There were, though, many more found in my head, face, and neck by an MRI.
Oh my goodness.
And also the ones, the calcified and the non-calcified ones were not identified in either of those two testing. So there's near 100, I'm sure.
Yeah, so I think this is one thing we should keep in mind. And on that topic, I would like to show one bit of a scientific article that is super important for your court cases and for the education of the public. I would like you to look up this scientific article. You can find it by online search. It's called Communication Challenges in On-Body and Body-to-Body Wearable Wireless Networks, a Connectivity Perspective. Now, these people have actually leaked quite a lot of information because they never intend for any one of us, of these victims, to see these papers, right? And look, they are just concerned with how we're going to connect all these wireless body, thingies. And look, if you look at the diagram, it will become immediately clear what we're talking about here. Okay. Let me just make this clear. Okay.
The Internet of Humans, body-to-body networks and wearable wireless networks.
Exactly, right? So these multiple chips, look, this guy has chips in his feet, in his shoulder, in his hand, the other one similarly, right? Now, they didn't dare to show all the massive amounts of chips in the heads, which is what this is really about. You know, it's not about, oh, does your left shoulder align with my ankle? No one cares about that. What they care about is, what are you thinking? What's your heart rate? What's the chemical, what are the hormone levels, and so on and so on. But anyway, all these chips can measure it, and then they can communicate over radio frequency. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is a scientific paper of 18 pages, which also talks about the specific communication protocol. So think frequencies, okay? But if you download this scientific article, then you can make it very clear that what this research is about is all these many body sensors and body implants communicating autonomously with each other without the people even knowing. So in other words, we're talking of a form of the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things was never your toaster communicating with your fridge, which is how it's been presented. The Internet of Things is your body sensors communicating with somebody else's body sensors, or even with your car, without you knowing.
And so why should they? I mean, ask ourselves that basic question: why should my body communicate with your body through implants?
Exactly. And I can't just stress how much, how important this is. But over here, you will find the actual communication protocols for all these, and also things like power consumption, signal strength, and so on. So when you have to prove to somebody, and also when you're looking for what frequencies to measure on your body, this will be a very good indication. So just for the record, one more time, the article is called Communication Challenges in On-Body and Body-to-Body Wearable Wireless Networks, a Connectivity Perspective. Okay, and the people who have published this, the 4 authors named here, work for Circom Lab, in Tunisia, Department of Electronics, Tallinn University, Estonia, and then there's, oh, sorry, that's actually feedback. And then also a company in France, so this is, this also indicates who's involved. Sorry,
Katherine, that's a pretty brilliant find. Let's post the link below. And, I have to tell people there's a bunch of articles on my website as well, including links to most of what we've talked about over here. If you check out RFID in the search bar on my page, you'll bring up a lot of these articles, or just microchips should bring up a lot of them. There's, a few headings for these articles, but I've been collecting info for a while. And I think I'll do a podcast short shortly, just presenting the bulk of this information shortly. And perhaps, I know we've been talking about it, we need to get together as a group as well and present some absolute information about implants. So we'll do a roundtable podcast as well very soon. So I'm just looking at the time again at this point, and so I know that I have to take off in a little bit. So if you guys have any last words about this, my last words on this whole subject will be implants, talking about implants and microchips and biochips and nanochips, etc. today is very, very relevant and very, very necessary and very needed. We cannot, as humanity, just give our free will away in this fashion. We cannot allow MIT and DARPA to manufacture consent for us. We need to start getting informed in a big, big way, all of us, and start speaking out within our own spheres of influence about this.
That's right. Well, I also want to encourage everyone, the pen is your friend. So if you are sitting there being assaulted, if you are being harassed and you have not taken any steps to report it to authorities or to government in any way, you need to begin to do that for yourself. That gives you your voice back. The biggest way that they get away with so much of this is our silence. And so many people are afraid of what are they going to do? What if they do this? What if they do that? One thing they're going to do is continue to harass you. So you may as well speak out. One of the most powerful messages I've ever heard in my life was my very first morning at seminary. The preacher, the title to her message was "Don't Go Quietly." And I took it. I took a picture with her at the beginning. I took a picture with her at the end of my doctoral education, and I have not been quiet.
Absolutely. I can just underline that and know that sometimes speaking out is very hard, but also know that especially if you speak out to family, to friends in your community, or especially on the internet, you will activate hundreds of people. So your speaking out will activate people like you who will identify with you, and you will literally kick off an avalanche. And it will be a silent avalanche. A lot of the time you'll be thinking, oh, I'm just speaking and no one is listening, but that is not true, because you always have an impact. And then I would like to finish off by taking it to the next level, because we are all speaking out, but we also want to make it stop. So I encourage absolutely everybody, because it's now happening, people, go to my website, it's Stop 007, and please, please go down to court cases. And for everybody who's a victim, please have a look at making court bundles and start thinking about how to structure your information. And also, please, if you can, follow the instructions here. And if you like the platform, sign up to Bundle Docs, because now over the coming weeks, I'll be putting out videos how to make a bundle. Because yes, you might have a lawyer, but even if you have one, don't trust them. You have to do this yourself. And in any case, you need to start putting together the evidence you have. All the medical information that we were talking about needs to be put together concisely in a bundle format. And once you have a bundle, you can not just take it to court, you can also take it to your representatives, you can take it to your medical doctor, and it will look professional and it will be absolutely undeniable. And the very last sentence I want to say is that there's so much evidence for directed into weapons and implants. I also, because she is not here, one of our colleagues, Melanie Richan, is still fighting, because Hospital Erasmus in Brussels has done a criminal operation and has kidnapped her baby, using the fact that she reported an implant that's already been taken out of her throat and has been measured at the Swiss lab and confirmed to be 100% synthetic. Even though she had all that evidence, Hospital Erasmus in Brussels pretended like they can still kidnap her baby, pretending she's mad. Now, this is going to backfire badly. But I want you to be in a position that, should you start talking about implants, have all the evidence ready so you can whack the entire folder on people's desks. This is why the bundles are so important, because they will not get away with this. And I can tell you already now that Hospital Erasmus has done the biggest mistake in their life, and their entire criminal operation, centering on Professor Marie Delhaye, will come down.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you for bringing that up, Catherine, because that is a criminal operation. It's absolutely egregious what has happened in Melanie's case. When she had the medical evidence to prove exactly what she was speaking about, she was ignored. Those are the actions of criminals in power. Those are criminal abuses of power, and that indeed is what we are also reporting, investigating, exploring, and speaking out about. And as both of you have just said, it's so important for everybody to speak out. Find your platform, whether it's on the internet or if it's through flyers in the community, getting in front of your city council, start informing people. We are living in situations of attack. We're all under attack currently by a system that, is running that's perpetrating crimes with impunity, and that's relying on people's silence and people's fear in order for it to continue. So let's not permit criminality to continue. Let's not permit abuse of power to continue. Let's speak out as human rights advocates, each and every one of us, and put the truth out there, because this is about truth, this is about evidence, this is about fact. So on that note, I do hope you'll join us. And thank you, Catherine, for putting all of that information on how to make bundle docs. Bundle docs is the name of that site, I guess, bundles of documents for court cases. So I think all of us can, learn how to do that and go to your site and do that. So on that note,
we're bringing bastards down.
Yes, bring the criminals down. We're all for it. If we do not speak out openly, who is here to speak for us? I wanted to say recently I've been looking at some of the things Rosa Parks has said. And one of the things that she said about that famous moment, when she refused to get up from the back of the bus was everyone thinks that, that she was tired. So she's made a few statements saying, no, I wasn't really tired per se. What I was I was tired of giving in. So she was tired of giving in, and she knew that someone had to make a stand. And so she made a stand by sitting down and refusing to give in. So
wow,
we should all be inspired by
Katherine, that. Well, I want to share too, the person that was preaching that message that morning that I was at seminary, her name was also Millicent.
Yes, very interesting, isn't it? And she was one of the first English suffragettes, right, from the UK?
Right.
Isn't that interesting? So you see, here we are in the Hunger Games scenario again, where all of our names and our words have echoes all around us. So in any case, these are good Millicent echoes.
Exactly. I mean, people should know also that the article that Millicent sent to me was Millicent Fawcett's statue has now been unveiled in Parliament Square between the House of Parliament and the UK Supreme Court in London. So it is a very powerful moment. Because as it turns out, in the 21st century, we have to fight for women's rights again, because they're trying to enslave us on the rebound. We have to vote, but we don't have the right to our own bodies anymore, which is really extraordinary. And this is what we're fighting for now.
That's an excellent point. And indeed, it's not just women anymore. It's women, men, and children. Our bodies are under attack currently, and there are efforts now by the deletes, as Stephen Shellen calls them, to simply lay claim to all human bodies and all human brains and connect them, as you just showed in that scientific paper, Catherine, connect them via the Internet of Humans. Do we really need an Internet of Humans? I really would rather not be connected to the losers next door, this side or that side. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think as one last.
They're using demented. I'm sorry, but they're using demented super soldiers to connect us to.
Yeah.
And then they get to surveil up to 1,000 to 2,000 of us.
Yeah.
And they get to tell us how to act appropriately, and when to sleep and when not to sleep, and when to use the bathroom. Not quite.
So this is human slavery. This is modern electronic slavery. that is not just round the corner, that is already here, that people are reporting, and that's round the corner for everybody in the world, because the Internet of Humans demands absolute enslavement of the entire population. We're talking about full spectrum dominance and full spectrum surveillance. So, each one of us needs to make added efforts at this point in time. One, to get the news out, and two, to start speaking out. If you know something, start speaking out, please. Don't say something to the DHS, because the DHS is part of this. So we start speaking out about what the DHS is doing, what the FBI is doing, what the CIA is doing, what the NSA is doing, and what we are indeed discovering through our own understanding, research, and, explorations. And really, it is research, because I think what we're doing right now through this podcast and through all of our efforts online is to put the information out there for people to explore further.
Exactly. And then what Millicent said is that when we're watching these happy videos coming out of MIT labs, this is, you don't have a brain chip to order pizza, or, and you don't even have to pick up a phone anymore. That's not why they're spending billions, if not trillions of dollars on this sort of technology. No, the idea is that they decide when you want to order a pizza, and then they will order it for you. And things like that. And this is now not just blue sky research anymore. Thanks to most likely Oxford, somebody who I suspect has shown himself to me many times, as in Lord Sumption, maybe his MI6 pals like John Scarlett and their minions, they are now controlling my entire life, including when I orgasm at their will or at the press of a button on their mobile phone. That's the reality. They have found, these degenerate men, like Millicent has said, have found a way to enslave people, to sex traffic people, by just using their mobile phone in a 21st century manner. And this is what it's about. So when you see this, what we're presenting, this is not about, your heart rate being connected to your tablet. This is not what it's about. It's about, somebody else from their tablet deciding when your heart stops.
It's about degeneracy, voyeurism, enslavement, and human trafficking. That's exactly what it's about. And, I think these scientists who've gone off their rockers do need to be informed as to the reality of what's going on. And it's along these lines, by the way, that we should mention the current effort to ban electromagnetic weapons. We are currently out of time, but this is something we will definitely talk about at length in one of our podcasts. There is an effort, a very big effort underfoot by human rights groups, advocates, and scientists and journalists coming together behind the scenes. It's soon to be made public, to ban directed energy weapons and to ban neuro weapons, because these weapons are weapons of human enslavement. So we'll talk more about that in coming days and times. So for now, we should probably just wish everybody a good morning and take off and go do what we need to do. So thanks everybody for watching. Any last words, anybody?
Make your bundle. Have a great rest of the day.
Make a good bundle and have a fabulous day. Collect your evidence. Plan to speak out, and please speak out not just for yourself, speak out for all of us.
That's right.
Thank you. Bye-bye.